Okay, all right, guys. All right, so what we're going to be doing is we are going to be talking about India and looking at our targets right now. We're going to first of all describe the trade rights Westerners sought in Ottoman Empire and India. We're going to focus on India. We're going to explain how Britain comes to control all of India, and then finally we're going to identify the benefits and the problems that non-Western countries face as a result of imperialism. So all of those are going to be our focus for today. All right, we're going to go on. Okay, so in case you weren't certain, we're going to talk about India. All right, here we go. So India was a land of great diversity, and for Britain, they're going to use that in to gain control. Now, what I want you to do is right now I want somebody to tell me, what is diversity?
It's a divide.
Well, that's the root, is divide, but it's what? What is diversity?
Just different.
Yes, different peoples, different groups of people. So, and in India, unlike a lot of places, we are going to see that to be a big deal. And let me give this as an example. We're sitting here in a class, we got about 30 kids here, okay? And for India, each one of you would represent a different group of people. You would, Cassidy would speak one language, Kayla would speak another language, and yet look how close they are. But they have different way of seeing things. Their culture will be different. Their heritage will be different. And for India, that's going to be a problem because Britain, who is really strong, is going to arrive, and they're going to use those differences to make it easy for them to take over. Because if Cassidy and Kayla speak different languages, how easy is it for them to unite? Why not? Why wouldn't that be easy? Yeah, just there's a basic lack of understanding to begin with. Okay? Now, the thing also is this diversity also meant that a lot of times there were rivalries going on. Like, for example, you might have where, let's see, Trevor might not get along with, let's see, Brent, okay? So you've got two groups here, and they've been warring with each other for centuries. So how well are they going to get together to keep Britain out? They can't, right? So this diversity is going to make it easy for Britain to go, whoo, look what we can do. And they pretty much do, take over India. Yeah, it is. Okay, India was home to many cultures, as we said. The original Mughal Empire is beginning to crumble, and these groups could not unite to expel outsiders, especially the British. This is basically the same thing that happened to the Ottoman Empire. If you remember in that video, you should have heard me talk about how that these rulers of the empire were corrupt. And this is pretty much the same thing that's happening here in India. They could not get along. They were not good rulers. They fought with each other. And again, Britain could slide in without any difficulty to take over. So, Britain takes advantage by encouraging competition between rival princes. Okay, just imagine Trevor and Brendan are rival princes, and so you've got it impossible to keep out Britain, and in fact, Britain does everything they can to keep them at odds with each other. Okay? So, British eventually controls all of India. Alright, we got it? Moving on. Who and what is the British East India Company? Now, British East India Company actually arrived in India before Britain, the government. is literally a business, a company. And what they did is they arrived in India and they see a lot of resources. And they're probably standing there going, ooh, this looks good. And what can we do to control it? And so British East India Company begins to organize themselves. And not only do they begin to control territory, but they also build their own military. So, British privately owned company seeking to trade with India. This company makes alliances with local officials and independent rulers, and it had its own army of sepoys, or Indian troops. Okay, so here we go. We got Brandon and Trevor again at odds with each other, and now the British Indian Company is saying, look, you better start listening to us, or we're going to send our troops in and do what? Yeah, take you out. Okay? So are you getting the idea that there's a lot of control going on? You bet. They use their army to control the area, and by the 1700s it will use its great wealth to dominate most in India. So what happens is they become extremely wealthy. And remember, this is the time of industrialization. They are becoming more and more wealthy. And that great wealth makes it real easy to say to, oh, let's see, let's make somebody else important here. Michael, they're going to make Michael Michael, they're going to say to Michael, okay, Michael, you know, if you agree with us, we will pay you, and then you must, though, work with us to keep your people under control. But we're going to make you wealthy, Michael. We're going to make it really worth your while. So, Michael, what are you going to do? You bet. Yeah. So, but here's what happens. Good old Michael, bless your heart, is going to be wealthy. Good for you. And those who he's controlling, because he's a prince, he's controlling a group of people, they're going to be pretty poor. Yeah. He's going to benefit, but the poor generally don't. All right. Again, you getting the picture? You getting the picture? Okay. All right, so by the time we're getting to the 1850s, where imperialism is starting to really rock and roll, India is already pretty much under the control of the British East India Company, the BEIC. So you can see, not only do they control much of India, they also control areas in Burma and in Siam. Siam is today Thailand. So they have spread out and done a lot of control. The problem with the British East India Company is their whole goal is money. In fact, let me go on to the next screen. They're all about money. They, as is any business, they're out for profit. So, the thing is, they're going to be so focused on profit and making money that they will not care about the quality of life for the people they have come to control, the Indians. In fact, it gets so bad there will be a rebellion. And the rebellion is within their own troops. That story is interesting in that the troops, they insisted that the troops use specific type of, for lack of a better way, bullets that were covered, these bullets were covered in pig grease. Now, if you know anything about the Muslim and Hindu religions, that to even touch anything that's pig is sacrilegious, and which is a bad thing. But the East India Company cared less. They insisted that these troops follow this rule, and finally the troops, because it went so much against their heritage, revolted. And it ended up in the deaths of several hundred English people. Well, it got so bad that because of that, then the British East India Company retaliated, killing thousands of Indians. It got so bad that the British government, and here's where the British government arrives, and says, you can no longer control the country. the country. We will now step in and take over. Okay? So now instead of a company being in charge, now the country of Britain, their government, is now in charge. Okay? Right. So Britain government tries to do a little better job. They are not all about money, although they are, really. But they try to do a better job. They are more interested in governing and using the resources a little more successfully. Now, hopefully you remember, I don't know if all of you got the Ottoman, the Ottoman done the last class. You should have.
Yep.
You should have remembered that part of what you did in that was look at the different types of rules, colonial rule that existed. Remember, there was protectorate, sphere of influence, direct rule, and indirect rule. Okay, indirect rule is an example of Britain. Now, Britain, that type of rule made Britain very strong. And so what they did is they are interested in continuing to help India, but through their policies, through this indirect rule. Okay, we got it here? We good so far?
Yeah.
All righty. Okay, so they establish, the government establishes that now there's going to be a British viceroy, who is basically the governor. If you want to put it in common terms, he's the governor of India, and he rules in the Queen's name. So he's the top guy. Okay. Then other high officials are going to be British, up here. Okay. But anybody after that, these local officials are all going to be Indian. So this is the form of indirect rule. There are going to be plenty of officials that continue to be Indian, but the top guys are going to be British. So with that, then, with that local communication or cooperation, I should say, India becomes extremely, what's the word I want? Extremely successful for Britain. In fact, they call it the crown and the jewel of the British Empire. There is so much wealth there that Britain is going to see themselves just unbelievably wealthy as a result of India. Okay, moving on. No. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Say what you got. Okay. And then start with this where you stop. Okay? So you don't have to redo the whole thing. Put at the top. The rest is on, because you'll need to upload that you've got done. And then put the rest is on online. Yeah, at the top of that. Which you put in. Okay, can I go now? Yeah.
Actually, if you go back to the only way the target,
I will come back at the end. I will not do it now. Okay. All right, so British leaders assume that providing Indians with a British education would lead them to accept British culture and rule. Again, if you remember, part of what was in that description of colonial rule was the fact that what Britain did was would take the local rulers' kids and send them off to school in Britain and educate them. Now, good or bad thing? Yeah, I mean, they're getting an education.
Good for them, but bad for them.
Because they are being taught the British way of life. That's their expectations. They're not taught about their culture. They're taught about British, about Britain. So, okay. But the interesting thing is that, Britain is expecting them then, these kids to come back and be British. What happens, in fact, is these kids come back, they are still very much Indian, and in fact, because of the time spent in Britain, they now understand democracy. And what is democracy? What is that? What's the expectation? Freedom.
Right to be heard.
Right to be heard. Who rules then? If you're free, who rules?
The one you choose.
The one you choose, the people. Exactly. It backfires on the British. What they find is these kids come back and they want their own country ruled by themselves. This is exactly the example of Gandhi. Gandhi's went, educated in Britain, comes home, and becomes the father of his nation to promote self-rule, to kick out Britain. So, now, it doesn't happen fast, obviously, but the goal of this nationalistic movement is self-rule. So if you didn't type that in, type it in. Self-rule. Type that in. Just write it. We're doing it here. We're doing it now. This is the same discussion we had. We can hear it. Get started right now. Mr. Thompson, would you keep in mind that he actually does start typing things? Okay, what number are we on? 13. All right. So, any changes the British make are always going to be in the British favor. You know, they do modernize, and we're going to look at a little bit later at all of the things they successfully do for Britain, for India. Britain does make some important changes. It does modernize India. They see better transportation. They will see better communication. They'll see a lot of good things. But all of those changes will always be to benefit the British. It just happens they will benefit the Indians as well. But the British see that as, well, see, we're benefiting them. Now, I want to, before we go too much further, I want to go back. What is the attitude? What do we call this attitude of believing that the whites are superior to any other race or the non-Europeans? Racism. Also known as social Darwinism. Now, you read about that when you did your paper. Talked about in the articles, social Darwinism. This is the attitude of racism. Okay. So, British felt they were helping India to modernize, but policies, as I said, always benefited the British. Britain will flood India with things, a lot of machine-made textiles. India had a very prosperous textile trade. But because of Britain showing them Britain's cheaply made textiles, it will destroy part of their prosperous trade. Okay, if you remember in the video, they even showed cloth that one of the kings, and I think it was King George III, he will have on Indian silk, beautiful material, handmade. But this cheap material that Britain will bring and sell and force these people to buy. Remember I told you that. No, we have this stuff to buy. You may not buy anything else but our stuff. Is what they will do. Britain will also encourage farmers to grow cash crops. In fact, they'll encourage them to cut down any trees, to make more land, to produce more cash crops. The problem is they'll push them so hard to produce these cash crops that they will not produce crops that will feed when you don't have enough food?
We starve.
What's the word?
Famine.
Famine. Right. There's not enough food being grown, and so there's a terrible famine. Not enough food. Yes.
That's
Okay. So this will lead to deforestation, meaning there's, and what happens when deforestation happens? You should
No air.
pollution. Yeah, you're losing. The trees hold the ground in place. You start seeing a lot of erosion. You start seeing a lot of problems when the trees are gone. Okay, so shortages of food and terrible famine result. Again, do you think the higher up people suffered?
No.
Who was it that was going to suffer? The poor suffer horribly under this system. Okay, move on. All right, so Indians were divided in their attitudes towards the British and towards modernization. Some of the upper class and the educated Indians will adopt modern ways. They'll see it as a good thing. Opportunity. Hindu and Muslim religious leaders will oppose the British style of modernization. They won't like it. What religion will the British be bringing? Right, remember that's the blessings of industrialization was Christianity. Obviously these religions that have been entrenched in India for a long period of time aren't interested in Christianity. But the British will push it and push it hard. Okay, so we're going to see in India that there will be some who do appreciate and do want the modernization. And as you saw in the video, the modernization was important because it meant that more and more people were able to take advantage of these benefits. But it's a slow process before the majority of people have that opportunity. Nope. Okay. Did you hear that? Alright, so British were also divided in their attitudes toward the Indian culture. So it wasn't just one-sided. People began to recognize that, and as Indians, their literature and their culture had a lot that was very beneficial. Let me ask you, who here has ever participated in yoga?
I'm going to.
Okay, yoga. Yoga's become like a big thing recently. More and more people. A lot of the professional athletes are taking it and using it because it improves strength and it improves balance and there was one other thing. Oh well. But anyways, it's a big thing. Indian religions, different ways of looking at things. And we could spend huge amounts of time talking about the different issues and culture that exist in India. For example, during this time there was classes, you know what I'm saying, upper, middle, and lower class, you understand what I'm saying, right? Well, in India, they didn't call them classes, they called them castes. That's C-A-S-T-E, castes. And, yeah. Anybody have it? Last word? Yeah. So, there was a class which would be the lowest of low, known as the untouchables. And the untouchable class is literally what it sounds like. If I was an untouchable, first of all, I could never be teaching you because I would never have been allowed to even have an education, because that would have meant I would be near any of you. And in untouchables, even their shadow shouldn't touch you. For example, if I would walk up to Mac, okay, and just be this close, she would have to go through a whole ritual to cleanse herself of having been near me as an untouchable. If my shadow would cover, like, his food, he would have to throw the food away and get new food. It would be unacceptable. Much less an untouchable actually touching someone. And so the untouchables didn't even, they literally would live in the garbage to be able to get food.
I just run around touching.
Okay, if you tried to do that, you would be killed. That would be so against. It's really hard for me to tell you about the Indian culture and the caste system and all of that in even one class, and we don't have time. But if you do want to look at that and do want to research it, it is an interesting process. You had your hand up, Eric.
Yeah.
What? Shh. Well, sure, yeah. That would be a form of racism. Right. Exactly. And the thing is in a caste system, if I was born into the caste, whatever caste I was born in, that's where I stayed. You know, in our system, in a class system, if you were born in the lower class, but you work hard and, you know, through a lot of different ways, you are able to make money and become wealthy, would you still be considered low class?
No.
No, you would be considered upper class. You could work your way out. In this system, whatever you were is what you were. Yeah.
Okay, so how would they like
You were born into it. You were born into it.
what?
It was a system that was created a long time
They
before.
just decided to choose someone like, hey, you need to like.
Again, that's probably something that you could research and find out. I honestly don't know. I just know that it was a system that had existed for centuries. Okay? So, one thing, they also, and I'll throw this out for you very simply, they also believed in reincarnation. So if you die, you could come back into a higher system, a higher caste, but you could also die and go to the lower class.
What's
Caste.
lower than a caste?
Lower
I mean,
class.
untouchable.
That's it. I mean, you can't get any lower than that because basically you are less than.
What if somebody
Well,
gave
you
you
could
a
be
touchable
dead.
money?
Untouchable mug. Is that what you said? An untouchable what? An untouchable?
I said, what if you give the untouchables money? Would that become upper class?
No.
Would
No.
they kill that guy?
And in fact, it was unusual, but you could be an untouchable and have some money. It was not likely you're going to be wealthy because of the circumstances, but because of maybe you were smart enough to get something that allowed people to buy. But you know who you traded with back and forth could only be untouchables because anybody else could not touch anything that you touched.
How would you know if they're untouchable or not? Do they wear different clothes?
They could, yeah. I'm not sure. They may have had some specifics. Again, I'm not an expert on this. I know the basics. Okay, so feel free to find out. It's an interesting thing. I don't know whose hand was up first. Okay, Caleb.
Are there still like concentrated?
Yes, believe it or not, there are still in the Indian society. There is still that. I mean, they have long ago outlawed it, but there is still that leftover kind of attitude for some. And usually I would bet, I can't say this for certain, but I would say the poor in India were probably considered untouchables at one time. Their family probably weren't. Yes?
I was actually going to say something about that. I considered untouchables to Hindus. Like they live on boats and stuff like that, and they
Okay.
travel through the rivers.
Is that right?
Yeah,
I
there's
did
a lot
not
of
know
them
that.
too. They all hide on these little huts. They
Uh-huh.
go down the river.
Uh-huh.
They're all gypsies.
I'll be darned, I did not know that.
They,
So, it's an-
Hindus don't like gypsies.
It's an issue, well, there aren't too many cultures that do. Gypsies do not have the greatest reputation. Doesn't mean that they're bad, but a reputation, just like anything, can make life difficult. Alright, so, let's see, I don't think I've talked about this. Yeah, I started to. So British do gain respect for Indian literature. They think it's beautiful. They see that it's got a lot of possibilities. Their religious ideas. One religious idea that we might find unusual here in Preble County is cows are sacred. Cows could literally go anywhere they wanted because they were considered sacred. Cow could walk into your house. Would you be allowed to shoo it out?
Yeah.
Nope. You would not. A cow would be allowed to go anywhere it wanted, and you could not shoot it away. And in some cases, depending on the type of monkey, also monkeys were seen as holy. Yes.
I read, no, I was watching TV, and I guess it was like this history channel, and they said that in, like, not China, but kind of like near China,
Okay.
if even a cow is in front of your car
India.
and honk the horn, you would be like,
You could be jailed. I mean, that is still true today. Cows are considered sacred. You don't mess with the cow.
What if the lion?
there was no
That's
way
different.
I would
That is nature taking its course. But as a person, you better not mess with the cow.
We kicked one out of my yard. They were trying to eat our cat.
Yeah, no, can't do that.
We heard
Yes.
it.
It's there. Oh yeah, you can touch it, pet it, and do that kind of thing. But you will not be allowed to. No, nothing negative. You can love on the cow. Hey, well, why don't you just sit here for right now? Yeah.
Cow jumped out front of your car and you can't see it.
Yeah, but you'd be in trouble. You need to, it's just like anything, today, for our society, if a pedestrian steps out, you are still, as the driver of a car, you better be the one that stops, because you can still be charged with vehicular homicide or manslaughter, even though it's the person's fault, yeah, because you were supposed to be in control of your car at all
I
times.
took a video of that guy doing that.
It doesn't matter.
It's like
It
people
does not matter.
beat up someone and end up killing them. It's invalid.
Straight weights.
Exactly. Even if that person was the first to swing. Now, you would have a defense. It wouldn't be,
It would be self-defense.
So I still got
no,
ice
yeah,
and
it
then
could be, but there's more to it than just that. Somebody's hand was up over here, I don't remember who it was. Oh, okay. Alrighty, so any questions about what you just saw and did? Okay, make sure, because that's the last one, right? Make sure, what do you have to do?
upload.
Save, upload.
Where's the upload?
The upload is, it's right there under Unit 3.
Go all the way down.
It's on this week, yes.
Go to the targets. I can get all of them.
Oh yeah, the targets, I'll go back. Wait a minute, let me stop this. Say what? Okay. Alright, what I want to do now is we're going to have an activity that goes with this. So what I need for you to do, and you've got it, you see it, you're going to do the same thing as you always do is make sure to do the add text and then fill in. And I know this works because my second block class had no problem doing it. What you're going to do is you're going to fill in the benefits and the problems. I'm going to let you do that. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll up a little bit so that you can see. There we go. So the benefits include improved communication and transportation. Pushes farmers to grow cash crops such as cotton and jute, improve the medical care, increased food production, their benefits is they had peace and order in the countryside. They had a revised legal system, and it promoted, I'm going to just finish this, promoted justice for all classes. And then on the other side, Britain will flood, these are the problems, Britain will flood India with inexpensive machine-made textiles, ruining India's own economy, clearing forests for new farmland, led to massive deforestation. Increase in population leads to increased strain on food supply, and farmland increasingly being used for cash crop, not for local food supply.
Is that the last one after this?
No, it's not. There's actually not much more, but this. On the good side, British schools train native sons in military and civil service, and on the bad side, famine. Okay, I'll bring it back up.
So we can like unstop it.
And this way,